Hey everybody! I'm really excited to share with you the 3 things I like about Keystone North America. I was super happy to receive my Kickstarter-backed game, and the day it came, I opened it up and we got it on the table. So this really fits in with what's hot right now, which are those card and tile laying games in grids. So when I was at Gen Con, I played a game called Fife, which does the same thing in a 5x5 grid with discs that you draw from a bag. I love bag drawing. Enough about Fife. I also played a couple others, Village Rails and Village Green, and they had the same design with a 3x3 or a 3x4. And in this game, you've got a 4x4 grid where you are playing down all of these animal cards with the idea of conservation in mind. And it's really, really dynamic. The game plays 1 to 4, and turns are pretty simple. There is a line of available cards, and players are generally going to take that as their action. There is another location that I'll talk about in just a little bit where players can essentially spend their turn going to, but the main one is drawing these cards into your hand to play out in your tableau. So you will look at these and say, okay, the very first one on the edge is free. But if you want to go further in, you have to pay with those synergy tokens, which look like the little acorns. And that's just reminiscent of a lot of games that do a similar feature like Canvas with those little painter palettes. Now, in this game, though, those synergy tokens are not locked in. There's not a certain number, and only that much can be taken or played as in Canvas. In this one, you can actually get more and more and more synergy tokens, and I really like that feature. When players take a card, they simply place that card into one of their available 16 spaces, and it can go wherever they want. There are no restrictions. The only thing is that you want to strategically place a card to gain more synergy tokens, which is one way to gain more of those. They're going to give you that synergy because you are pairing things with like things next to each other. And you also want to score based on numbers. And so you just don't get to score a card at the end of the game if it doesn't match in ascending or descending order. And I'll get to more of the scoring a little bit later on. But honestly, that's the general gist of the game. You take one of those cards. If you need to place those synergy tokens out to get something further down the row, you take it and you put it into your area. And if you get those synergy tokens, you can take those back from the bank or from the pool that's available to all players. Now, the first thing I like in this game is the synergy tokens. It's so smart that you can generate them, you can gain them based on your own strategy. And if it doesn't make sense for you to gain them because you want to place a card somewhere else, that's your choice. But it does incentivize you to play adjacent, right, orthogonally with other cards that have those matching symbols. And all you're going to do is look at the card you just played and then look to the top, bottom, left, right. You're going to look at the orthogonal adjacent spaces. If there are tiles and they match the region, you get 1 for each matching. So the top one matches 1, you get 1. The one to the left matches 2 on the tile you just played, you get 2 more, and so forth. So that's the way you're going to get those synergy tokens so that you can play them out to gain those cool animal cards that you know are further down the line. There is another way to spend your synergy tokens, though. You can pay 10 of your synergy tokens and get what's called a wild card. The wild card that you take is going to have that location or habitat, and it's also going to have one of the seasons on it. But what's cool about this card is it acts as any number that you want, and it's going to matter because, again, at the end when you score, your numbers that you score all of your columns and all of your rows, and your numbers have to go ascending or descending right next to each other. They have to be adjacent. So I can't go 1, 3, 5. Those do go in ascending order, but I can't skip any numbers. So if I want to score a row or column, I need to have a 1, 2 or a 3, 4, 5. And you get to count the ones that are in direct ascending next to each other, sequential order. So this wild acts as that, and you can just buy it with 10 acorns. The second thing I like about Keystone North America is the secret objective cards. Now, these are dealt out to players at the very beginning of the game, so it gives them something to go for. These are big points if you can get them. If you just you achieve one of your goals on your card, you have 4 different goals, you can get 5 points. But if you get all 4, that's 24 points. So it's essentially 6 for each, but there's a nice gap between the third and the fourth that makes it really valuable. And 24 points in this game was essentially a quarter to a third of all of our scores. So getting the secret objectives is key, and I love that they're all different. And they ask you to find a variety of things that kind of throw a wrench in your ascending sequential numbers and the types of animals in matching seasons and locations. And that's what you're doing out with your board, and you're trying to complete those things for endgame scoring, but then you've got these secret goals that nobody knows about, and they don't know you need a certain tag or an endangered species, or you need to make sure that your animals go in a particular configuration. And so these different goals give you just enough to just kind of throw your brain off with this puzzle, and I love it. It's such a complex, nuanced focus to have while you're still doing all the other stuff in the game. So I think the private objective card, your secret objective, just makes the game. It makes the game what it needs to be, so it's gamery enough, and I loved it. The third thing I liked about this game is the skill action. This is what you do when you are not going to draw an animal from the open display. You are going to instead use the skills, and this is how the game triggers the end of the game, essentially. So when a certain number of these skill tokens have been flipped over to be used by someone, you move the turn marker down closer and closer and closer so that you know when the end of the game is getting near, and you know that it's player activated, it's player triggered. So it's not a set number of rounds that players play in this game. It's essentially the trigger of the turn marker on the skills, or when a player will fill in every single space on their board. And so there are a couple of ways that that could end, but the major way is that countdown with the skills. And when you go there, you get to do a variety of things, which is super, super fun. These skill tokens allow you to place down little checkboards. They're like a little token onto a matching icon card on your board, which essentially gains you 1 more point on that card when you score it. You can also move cards if you get to the move skill, and so it just allows you to add to your ongoing score or mobilize, kind of like respond later saying I placed this card here and I should have placed it over here, so you want to move it to a different space and trade it with a different card. So the skills allow you to do cool things like that, but that's only if the skill is active. You also can choose to turn over all of the exhausted tiles and take all of those actions, which is super cool because that's where you kind of find that, okay, should I do that now since there are 2 flipped over? Maybe I should wait till 3, but if it gets to 4, somebody in front of me in turn order is absolutely going to turn over all of those and take the actions on every single one of those exhausted tiles, which has a different backside. So you can either activate an active card, turning it over, and just do the cool thing, or you can unexhaust all of the exhausted ones, doing the backside of each of those exhausted tiles. So that just is really cool. It adds another layer of strategy and planning and preparation because, again, when you're playing a full game and it's 4 players at the table, stuff gets taken, turns get had, cards go away. You've got to really be able to respond in this game. There were a couple things that I think might have helped our gameplay, and perhaps it's a feature to the game, maybe it's just something that happened in my gameplays. But the first thing is that I feel like there are too many cards in the deck, and with 4 players, which is the max amount of players, we weren't able to see over half of the cards, which meant that we weren't always getting a variety of the animal types, the habitat types, the seasons, and the numbers that we wanted. The numbers were 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and sometimes it was like all we needed were a 2 or a 4, and it was just always 1s and 3s and 5s, or we needed 5s and no 5s would be there, and it was just everything else but a 5. And so I think it was just because the stack of cards was so big, and I wonder if there was some way for us to cull that, even though we were at the max players. It just didn't always give us the variety of cards that we needed. So that's one of my first critiques. Another one is that it seemed like the game took a really long time, and I know that there were some players who were taking a long time to make a choice because by the time it comes back around to you, a lot of things have changed, and your original plan, you just sit there and you're like, oh, well, I'm going to take that card. Well, then the next player takes it and you're like, oh no, I got to change my plan. I got to figure things out. I got to do math. And there's so much puzzling on your own player board and tableau that it can get a little long. You can spend a lot of time thinking about exactly what card you need and where it would be placed and what your second choice is and what your third choice is, because things just keep changing. So I think the game was a lot longer than I feel like it should have been. And then lastly, by the time you get to the end, tallying every single player's board, doing 4 columns and 4 rows, and making sure no one's made any mistakes with the way that you count up the points took a really long time. And if you look at the score sheet, you see that it's just a big grid and you just have to fill in every single number. And I have to say, it's pretty easy to maybe miss a multiplier or to miss one of those little check sheet boards you put on as one of your bonus actions. You get 1 more point, and it's hard to catch all the sequences of everything. So there is just a little bit at the tail end of it. So with those things in mind, though, I feel like there are a lot of other things to really appreciate about this game, about Keystone North America. And I think it's one of those games that you just have to return to because there's a lot of puzzling there and there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of, it's an abstract game. It really is. It has a theme to it and has cute animals on it. But it's really puzzling out the perfect terrain with the perfect season, with the perfect number. And then, of course, if you have those multipliers, then yes. And you want to get ascending sequential numbers or descending sequential numbers. So it's just a big, big abstract puzzle. It looks pretty and I love it. I'm really glad I got it. And there are, just wonderful features to it. Well, that's it for my 3 things I like about Keystone North America. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time, folks. Bye-bye.
3 things I like about
Keystone North America.
3 things I like about
Keystone North America.
3 things